My whole professional career, I've kind of had this very top-down focus, especially once I started graduate school when I was studying public health. A lot of the work in public health is very broad, very incremental, but kind of an inch deep. So you make broad changes that are very, very shallow. And then I started working in human rights in my doctorate, and that's a kind of a similar situation where you're making broad changes to the world that we live in. And of course, part of that was working in law and policy, and it's the same sort of thing. You put out a law, you hope people follow it, but you're making broad changes. It's really top down. And as part of that work, as part of my career progression, I began working with different UN agencies, working in areas of policy and standards and things like that. And again, it was this kind of very broad, very top-down approach. And I've worked with national governments in the US and in Norway and in Mozambique. And again, we're talking about top-down sort of approaches. I was even invited by the committee, the UN Committee on the Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, to present my research there. And again, top-down, looking at a broad focus and how that can kind of change things on the ground. Even being in academia, by definition, is kind of taking a broader analytic focus to our work and to our life. And I've been involved in a lot of international networks who have pretty much taken that same approach. I've gotten to work with industry leaders, and a lot of these multinational companies are thinking very broadly, very top-down. And I've acquired some kind of recognition in my field as a kind of leading researcher. So again, we're looking at this from a top down. I've been invited to a lot of businesses to be an advisor, and advisory positions are always kind of these top level, looking down at not looking down, but looking at the experience of the business from the top down. Now, throughout my career, the more my power and my influence grew, the less I started to care about the work that I was doing. And I know this might sound kind of oxymoronic or maybe just straight moronic, but it was really frustrating for me because I felt so disconnected from the groups of people that I wanted to have a relationship with, that I wanted to be connected to. And so I struggled for several years with anxiety and with depression. A lot of it, I think, had to do with feeling alone, feeling isolated, feeling lonely, because of the disconnection that I had with the people who were ultimately to be affected by the work that I was trying to do. So I just stopped really caring about my work for a brief period. It became routine. It just became kind of cycle of every day, month, week, semester. It didn't really fulfill me, and it didn't kind of give me that passion and that love that I really, really cherished and what I wanted to cherish in my work. So I just went one semester to the next, one class to the next, one grant proposal to the next, one funded grant project to the next. And then in 2019, I attended an event in Kampala, Uganda that absolutely changed my life. It was a turning point for me because I finally felt that my work at a high level, at the top down, was connected with work being done at the grassroots. And for the life of me, I don't know the person's name, but after I made my presentation at this conference, they came up to me and they said how important it was for them, they're working in startups and as entrepreneurs in Uganda, to hear from me an international perspective and to bring that perspective to their work. And so I spent weeks and months afterwards reflecting on that experience, trying to kind of make sense of it and derive some meaning out of it and think a little bit more strategically about the future of my profession, the future of my career. And I made the decision in those intervening weeks and months to just drop almost everything that I had been working on. So I keep folders and subfolders and subfolders and subfolders on my computer. Everything's nicely organized. And I had a folder of just all the papers, the academic papers I had been writing. And I had a folder of all the project proposals and ongoing research projects that I had going. And I had all these organized, and I just went through each one of them, and I just dumped like 80 to 90% of them. I just got rid of it. Papers that were on the verge of being published, I said, nope, I'm not going to publish it. I just don't care any longer. And same thing with the grants that I just didn't care about the work any longer. I said, somebody else can do it. I'll give that funding to someone else. Proposals that I was in the middle of writing, I told the partners, hey, look, I'm no longer going to be leading this. If you want it, take it, but it's not going to be something I want to dedicate myself to in the future. So I got to start fresh, and I got to set kind of a new set of goals for myself, and really to think critically about what it is I want in kind of the second act of my career. What did I want to do in this middle part of my career where I should be kind of at the top of my field? And one of those goals was just any work that I take on for the rest of my life, or at least this stage of my career, has to be grassroots. It has to be anchored in an individual or a community's reality. It cannot be high level looking down. It needs to be at the bottom level looking up. And I have to, my second criteria was the work that I do has to be with underserved communities. I no longer wanted to work in communities that already had resources, privilege, and power. And there's a lot of temptations in academic careers to focus only on these sorts of communities because that's where a lot of the grant funding is. But I said, no, I only want to serve, I want to serve underserved communities. And then the third criteria is that there has to be some kind of focus on universal design and innovation. So I don't want to do research just for the sake of doing research. I want innovation to be a key component because that's solution, that drives solutions, that drives my book, New Knowledge. And it has to have universal design as a key component because that gives me an ethical framework that I can operate in. Now, every week that goes by, I get some sort of offer from someone who wants to work with me, who either says, hey, Anthony, I got a project proposal I wanted to write and I want you to be part of it, or I got this new business I want to start and I want you to be part of it. And that's a flex, but it's not a flex also. It's just the reality that I'm facing. And I never say no. I never say flat out, no, I will not be involved. I always say yes. But I've stopped saying, I always say now, yes, and. If it's something that I don't personally take interest in or I don't want to do, I'll say, yes, I'll do it, and here is the person who can do it. Boom. I give that person their name, and I say, if you still want me to be part of this, I'll be happy to liaise with that person, to work with that person. And usually it's a student or someone I've been mentoring. So it gives me a chance to give them a new opportunity and a new chance. It rechannels that opportunity. And so in the last 2 years, I have felt a greater sense of purpose than I've ever felt in my life. I know what it is I want to do, and I care about what I do. And I've also felt a greater sense of belonging. Like there's not just a tribe, but there's multiple tribes that I belong to now that are kind of my people. These are the people that I care about the most. And I felt more connected to those communities than I have in my entire professional career. So the takeaway is this. Working at a high level can be really, really, really intoxicating. There's a lot of power. There's a lot of privilege. There's a lot of kind of perks that go with working at a high level. And there's a need for good people to be operating at that level. There's a need for people who have strong moral compunction, who have a strong ethical framework to actually fulfill the responsibilities of those positions. And there's a need, especially now, for a diverse representation in those positions. But if you find yourself working at that level and you feel a little bit lost, there's a chance that you might have experienced the same thing I was experiencing, where you've become disconnected to the communities that matter to you. And so my best recommendation here is, first of all, if you're operating at that high level, just keep tabs on that feeling. If you get to that point of disconnectedness, return to those communities, reconnect. Maybe get rid of those activities that you're doing that are at the high level, and find ways of getting anchored and rooted back in the grassroots. That can really make a difference. It made a difference in my life, and it gave me a greater sense of purpose than ever before.